South, so I'm gonna do as I do.
All right, thank y'all so much for being here. We've got a beautiful crowd. Thank y'all for braving the rain and coming out tonight for this important town hall. And I also want to thank Congressman Clyburn. Thank
you. Thank you.
I want to thank him for honoring his commitment to South Carolina voters and traveling outside of his district to talk to voters like you who feel underrepresented and unheard. In addition to having his own town halls in his district, he's agreed to do 2 town halls outside of his district, and he knew that it was critical that we come to the upstate. So this is his idea for us to be here in Spartanburg this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this is part of a national effort for Democrats to make sure that we go around the country, that we get Democratic leaders to go around the country in Republican districts where they have members who don't want to participate in this democracy and making sure that they're having public town halls. So this is our very first in-person town hall. We've had 3 virtual town halls. And if you're not following us online and all the spaces and places, please do so, because we're working really hard to make sure that we're getting factual information out to not just Democratic voters, but to all voters, and to make sure that you're armed with what's going on. So you can follow us online on all our social media channels, SCDP, South Carolina Democrats, and at our website. If you haven't signed up for our action alerts, please do so. Go to the SCDP website and do that. So we've got a couple of quick speakers, quick introductions. So I want to make sure to thank and introduce the president of Wofford, President Sam Hatt.
Thank you.
Well, again, I'd like to welcome you all here to Wofford College, where we are committed to academic freedom academic freedom and civil discourse consistent with our mission and values here at Wofford College. I want to highlight actually another event in this new series, Candid Conversations, next April 29th. Bakari Sellers and Trey Gowdy will be here on campus and having good civil debate, engaging in civil debate. But I really want to extend a most warm welcome to Congressman Clyburn for being back home at Wofford College.
Thank you.
When you served on the college's board of trustees, and I want to thank you for choosing our campus to hold this town hall event. We're honored. Now let me welcome to the podium Mayor Jerome Rice. Mayor Rice has been a public school educator for more than 30 years. He served on Spartanburg City Council for 12 years before becoming mayor, and during that time, he helped develop a vision for our city with a focus on preparing our community for the next generation. Welcome, Mayor.
Thank you all for being here this evening. It is truly an honor that we're sitting here and standing here tonight to hear from a living legend and Councilman Clyburn. So I do want to also thank President Sam Hatt, the South Carolina Democratic Party, Crystal Spain, the Spartanburg Democratic Party executive team, Catherine Harvey, Angela Edwards. But also I want to thank you for truly want to thank you for being here. Any other elected officials, as I do look out at Councilwoman Brown that's here, all the other elected officials, thank you all for coming out. Good to see you, Representative Myers, Henderson Myers. and anyone else I may have missed throughout. But again, it is truly my honor to stand before you tonight as the mayor of the city of Spartanburg and welcome you here to this special gathering. On behalf of the people in Spartanburg, I extend a heartfelt greeting for all of our distinguished guests in South Carolina Democratic Party. And the one and only Congressman Jim Clyburn. Congressman Clyburn, your leadership has been inspirational to many of us, not just in South Carolina, but across this great nation. Your tireless commitment in advancing the cause of justice, equality, and the opportunity made a profound impact on our community. You are a champion for the working people of our state, and we're deeply grateful for your service. I'm here to also just thank you all again for coming this evening. We look forward to a great conversation, and I will turn it over to the Spartanburg Democratic Party Chair, Catherine Hall. Thank you.
Take it off. There we go. There we go. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. What an incredible crowd we have here tonight. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, Crystal Spain and her extraordinary staff. 1 minute of housekeeping. If you have a question card, please raise it up. The folks are going to come gather those now. And if you need a pen, please raise your hand so we can make sure you get one to fill out your card. Those are your two jobs this evening, folks. We're so excited to have you here tonight. And I want to just take a quick moment and ask anyone who works with a local Democratic Party officer, executive committee person, volunteer, donor across the state or with the state party. Could you stand up really quickly? If you were a part of a local Democratic Party as a volunteer, a donor, an executive committee person. Okay. These are the folks doing the work along with our elected officials on the ground. We have not stopped since that election, and we are not going to stop. Okay? This is where our fight starts, and this is a people-powered movement, and we need you. This is not a fire drill. We are here. It's impacting our country, our state, and even this community. We have got to push back on our Republican elected officials who are rubber stamping this regime. Officials like Congressman William Timmons, who is not showing up for this community. We are honored that our congressman is here tonight and willing to engage at this very critical time. The White House has come from BMW, and they aren't going to stop. We are all targets right now, and we have got to stand together and fight back. And you being here tonight to be informed is an act of resistance in and of itself. So thank you. Do not stop showing up. It has never been more important to mobilize on a local level and to invest in your local parties and your state party, y'all. I have to say it. A lot of you got a flyer walking in about how you can get involved with the Spartanburg County Democratic Party, but your state party also needs support. We are working day and night to fight this. Crystal needs your support. I need your support. Our elected officials need your support. We are ready and we are fighting. And so are you. Thank you for being here.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And again, I know Mr. Mayor did that, but I do want to recognize any elected officials. If you're elected to school board, town council, city council, House of Representatives, please stand. And please, let's give our Representative Rosalind Henderson Myers, who flew down here from Columbia. I didn't think she was going to make it because just like the White House up in DC, is a mess. Up in Columbia is a mess as well. So thank her for her service and what she's doing in Columbia. So I'm going to pass it over to the congressman who I know has a few opening remarks. And then from there, we will take the cards. But I want to make sure you guys know what the cards are. So you got 2 cards when you signed in. One white card, that is your card for tonight to ask your question directly to the congressman. And then you got a yellow card. This card is for William Timmons. If you want to ask him a question, please fill this card out. And the Spartanburg Democratic Party, your leaders are going to take this to him later this week. So if you've got a question for him, fill it out and they'll make sure that you get it. And when we get to the question and the answer portion, what we're going to do, I'm going to take your card. I'm going to call your name. I'm going to call like 3 or 4 names and you just come to the mic and you ask the question that's on the card. Okay. So I'm going to pass it up to the congressman for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Crystal, for your tremendous leadership of our great party. And thanks to Madam County Chair, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, thank you both for welcoming me back to this campus and back to this city. It may not be known by many of you, but Spartanburg has played a very critical role in my development. I came here to do my directed teaching at what was then Carver High School. Representative Henderson Myers' father was a mentor to me. Mr. Henderson was one of those people that I really grew to love and had so much admiration and respect for. So when I got to this campus to serve on this board, I was coming back to familiar territory. And so I was kind of marveled as we finally got free of the traffic and I was coming at the 221 circle and coming down to see how much has changed. Ain't much changed. But thank you so much for having me. Let me say a couple of things to you tonight. I grew up in Sumter, and my father was a fundamentalist minister, and my mother a beautician. I grew up with 2 brothers. I'm 2 years and 3 months older than my brother John, who is 2 years and 2 months older than Charles. So we grew up pretty close together. And as you can imagine, there were sibling rivalries and sometimes there were little sibling altercations. Well, one day, during one of those altercations, my dad observed us. We were at our local neighborhood mechanic having my dad's 1937 Chevrolet worked on to keep it running for another week. And just as Mr. Singleton, the mechanic, hooked the pulley up to the front end of that automobile and started to raise it so he could get under it and do whatever needed to be done, my 2 brothers and I started to play near that automobile. And my dad said to us, "Now, boys, I have no idea how strong this chain is. It may break, this car may fall on you, and one of you may get hurt. So go out across the field and play." And we did. We weren't going long before we got into a little discussion. Now, you observing it might have thought it was a fight. It was not. It was a physical discussion. We didn't know it, but my dad was watching us. And when he thought that discussion had gone on long enough, he called the 3 of us over to him stood us in front of him. He was sitting there on one of those old wooden drink crates. Y'all remember the soda bottles used to come in a little wooden crate. And my dad was sitting on one of those, and he stood the three of us in front of him, and we were a bit apprehensive, and we noticed he had a cord string in his hands. He handed that piece of cord string to my brother Charles, said, "Charles, I want you to pop this string." Charles struggled, he couldn't pop it. He then took it back and gave it to my brother Johnson. "Now, John, you're 2 years older, you're stronger, you pop the string." John struggled and he couldn't pop it. He then took it back and gave it to me. He said, "Now, James, you're the oldest, you're the strongest, you pop the string." I struggled and I couldn't pop it. He then took that string back and he put it in the palms of his hands and he began to rub his hands together. And the more he rubbed, the more friction he created. And the more friction he created, the more unraveled that cord string became. And it was not long before that piece of string was in 3 pieces. He gave one to Charles, one to John, and one to me. He said, "Now, sons, pop the strings." With very little effort, all 3 of us popped the strings. He said, "Now, boys, I want this to be a lesson to you for as long as you live. Don't you let the little disagreements that crop up among you cause so much friction until it separates you. Because if you do, the world will pop you apart and you may never know why." I have never forgotten that lesson. And I think about it often, especially today, when I see the disagreements that crop up among us, in our families, in our communities, in this great country of ours. We cannot allow our disagreements to cause too much friction until it separates us as a nation. I know that it may be a bit comfortable for everybody to agree all the time. My goodness. I was married to the same woman for 58 years. I know about disagreements. And just because you disagree doesn't mean you have to be disagreeable. And so tonight, I want to remind you that this is a great country in no need of being made great. We've got to work together to make sure that the greatnesses of this country are made accessible and affordable for all of our citizens. That's what we've got to do. If it's healthcare, how do we make it accessible and affordable? Housing, energy, medical care, whatever it is, how do we work together so that all of our citizens can have accessibility and affordability for the things they need for their families, for themselves, and for the communities within which we live? And so that's our challenge. And so when we see what's going on in the country today, it's time for us to turn to each other, not on each other, to each other, and figure out how can we best work together to make things better for this great country. Now I'm going to ask whoever's got the slide and to put up slide number 13. Number 13, y'all can let me know when it's up there. First they came, you just passed it. And many of you remember this. You've heard it over and over again. And I want you to think about this. Pastor Martin Nemalia wrote this poem when he saw what was going on in Germany back in the 1930s. And he talked about the fact that people were turning on each other. First, they came for the communists. And just think about what we're experiencing today. Then they came for the socialists. Think about what's going on today. Then they came for the trade unionists. Then they came for the Jews. And by the time they got to me, no one was left to speak up. I want you to look at slide number 2, and then I'll answer your questions. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote these words when he was sitting in the Birmingham City Jail back in 1963. And when King wrote these words, he had received a letter from 8 clergymen, one of whom had South Carolina connections, telling him that they wanted him to leave Birmingham because he was a destructive force. But they said to him in their letter, said, now, Dr. King, we don't want you to get it wrong. We believe in your cause. We believe that your cause is right, but your timing is wrong. And King, when he answered them saying, the time is neutral. I think he used 4 words. Time itself is neutral. Time is never right and time is never wrong. Time is always what we make it. And then King went on to say that he was coming to the conclusion that the people of ill will in our society was making a much better use of time than the people of goodwill. I want you to think about that. He came to the conclusion that the people of ill will was making a much better use of time than the people of goodwill. And then he concluded with these words: we will have to repent, not just for the vitriolic words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Too many good people were silent last year. And we are now reaping what was sowed by some bad people last year. But we, as a people, as citizens of this great country, have got to break our silence. Your vote is your voice. We must use our voices to help preserve this great democracy. It doesn't mean we'll always agree. It doesn't mean it will always be pleasant. When I sat on the board of this institution, we had some unpleasant discussions at times. but it was a blessing for me. It was a blessing for this institution, because that's how we grow, by listening to different opinions, learning from each other. And that's what we want to do tonight. Now, I'm not going to raise my voice. I'm not going to be unpleasant in any way. And I would hope that we can answer your questions, we can have discussions, and do so in such a way that when our evening here is over, all of us will feel that we have benefited from having come out on this rainy night. I thought the only place that people didn't know how to drive when it rained was in Columbia. Well, I can tell you that people out on I-95 between here and Greenville, they don't know how to drive either. So we cut it real close, but we got here. And with that, I'm going to be answering any questions you may have. Now, I'm a pretty good politician, and which means I'm going to respond to all your questions.
Thank you, Congressman Clyburn. And I will be remiss if I didn't recognize one of our best senators we ever had, former Senator Glenn Reese. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight. All right, let's get to it. All right, Peyton Harvey. When I call your name, just come to the mic, whatever mic is closer to you. I'm going to call 4 names, and make sure you ask the question that's here. Peyton Harvey, Allison Muller, Laura Brooks from Spartanburg, and Loretta Presley from Simpsonville. There's a mic here and there's a mic here. Are these people still here? Okay, well. Allison Muller of Greenville, Laura Brooks, Peyton Harvey, and Loretta Presley. If you're up there, there should be a mic up there. Somebody staffing the microphones up there. And there's a question card up there too, somebody. Clemson, there's a question up here in the front. I think they're up there. Someone said they were going to be up there. All right, we'll bring them up there. All right, let's go, Mr. Harvey.
Coming, I get closer. Thank you for coming, Congressman. My question is, how much in danger is our Social Security?
Great question. Let me say this about Social Security. As you know, Social Security is a social contract that came into being. Those of you who know the history of Social Security, after the tremendous stock market crash of 1929, this country went into a Great Depression. And part of that was the so-called New Deal. And the big part of the New Deal was the creation of Social Security. In fact, I've seen one study that indicated that at the time, over 80% of the senior citizens in this country were in poverty. And Social Security came online, and it cut that poverty level down to less than 10%. A lot of people say Social Security is the greatest anti-poverty program ever created. Now, our Republican friends have always had a problem with Social Security. I've never been able to understand that. If you go back and look at, as I have done, all the debate, don't look at the final vote on Social Security, but look at all the debate on Social Security, and the Republicans hated it. They tried everything they could to stop Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, let me be clear, from putting Social Security in place. Now, when they failed on all the amendments they put up, they then came on board, and when the final vote came, it was an overwhelming bipartisan vote. but the final vote is not indicative of the lead up to the Social Security. So for some strange reason, they've always had a problem with it. So the president has called Social Security a scam. Elon Musk has called it the greatest Ponzi scheme of all time. To me, Social Security is a contract that our government has made with every worker. I started paying Social Security at the age of 16. And if all goes well, from July 21st, I'm going to celebrate the 46th anniversary of my 39th birthday. Now, that adds up to 85. Now, I've been paying Social Security a long time, paying into it. And even when I was a student at South Carolina State, I worked in the cafeteria, paying Social Security. So it's a big trust fund that's been there for a long time. And investors, some investors, have been trying to get their mittens on that trust fund for a long time. They would love to get into that trust fund and start gambling on Wall Street with the money you pay in. That is a big danger. Now, some of you may recall several years ago, around the time that George W. Bush was advocating privatizing Social Security, we had a scandal on Wall Street, a guy named Madoff. Made off with a lot of people's money. True. And just think of what would have happened to Social Security if that trust fund had been exposed to that kind of investment. So we have got to protect Social Security because the president calls it a scam. His most trusted advisor is calling it a Ponzi scheme. They're doing things that they can to discredit Social Security. They're closing Social Security offices. They're changing the rules. They're now saying if for you to renew your disability or you to prove your disability, you got to come to a regional office. You can't do it by phone. If you got a disability, it seems to me, it could very well prevent you from making that trip. But then even if you don't have a disability and you're closing the regional offices and you're laying off workers, then what is there? So Social Security is in danger, big danger.
Go over here. What was your name?
Mueller.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Mueller.
Allison. Who do you think we can work with and encourage across the aisle to encourage them to work with us and get some good results from people across some specific people we can encourage?
Well, this may surprise you a little bit, but you know, it all depends upon the issue as to who you can work with. We as Democrats have a pretty big net of that we use to bring things in. We have some people call it a big tent party that a lot of people are under. And so there are a lot of issues that we feel very passionate about, that there's some Republicans, like there's some Republicans who don't like Social Security. Some Republicans don't like Medicaid. But it means that there's some Republicans you won't get, but there's some Republicans who do like Social Security and some who do like Medicaid. So it all depends on what the issue is as to whether or not you will reach across the aisle. I have no problem reaching across the aisle. I do it a lot. I think most people know here that I'm giving credit by a lot of people all over the country for having been the biggest advocate of getting broadband into our infrastructure bill. And I became an advocate for that because my late wife lost a 30-year battle with diabetes. Emily fought diabetes. She finally, succumbs to it after having 5-vessel bypass heart surgery, a stroke, total kidney failure. And one day, I got a call from a doctor who said to me, this is when we were fighting to try to get the Affordable Care Act. He says, I'd like for you to stop by my office. I want to share something with you. And his office was only about 4 or 5 blocks from my office. I had never met him. I went by his office and he sat me down. He says, I've been following this debate. I cannot say much politically, but I just want you to know, though I may not be public with it, I am for what you're doing, and let me show you why. And he sat me down at his desk, and he had a desktop computer on his desk, and I'm sitting behind looking at this stuff. He had arranged for the Beaufort Jasper Comprehensive Healthcare Center, 136 miles away. We're in Columbia. Beaufort Jasper down in Sheldon, Beaufort County. And a man was sitting at a desk or, examination chair with his eyes to the computer. And he showed me. He said, see this in this man's eyes? He has diabetes. He doesn't know it yet. We'll tell him after this examination. He has diabetes. He's in a rural part of South Carolina. He can't get to the hospitals and the healthcare that he needs. He said, unless you all do something about broadband in the state, we are not going to be able to practice medicine effectively. He said, we've got to have telemedicine in the rural areas. And to do that, we got to have broadband access that we don't have. And I thanked him, and I got up to leave, and he says, by the way, I'm one of your wife's doctors. He never told me, and I didn't know. And quite frankly, honoring that conversation, I never told my wife that I had talked to her doctor. But it did something to me. And that's what got me onto this broadband thing. So I was able to get a group of people together in both parties, quietly in my conference room. We met periodically to map out our strategy for getting that $65 billion in the infrastructure bill for broadband. And Governor McMaster has been public in his support. We had 2 joint press conferences telling the world that but for yours truly, we wouldn't be where we are today in South Carolina. By the end of next year, every single house, every single business will be connected to the internet in this state. So it all depends upon the issue. If you remember, we got all of the judges. All of our judgeships were filled, federal judgeships were filled in South Carolina. I didn't have any press conferences. I got all of them filled. Why? because I was able to work across the aisle to get my Republican friends not to filibuster my recommendations. So every judgeship in South Carolina, you can say the same thing for other states, but we got all of them. Because on that issue, I could pick someone to work with. So I work across there, but there, for the comprehensive Democratic agenda, I don't know of anybody on this side that you're going to have to take issue by issue and reach out to people that way.
Right here.
Okay.
Mike, I have two questions. Are there any reasonable Republicans in government representing the people? Then my other question is, will Congress take back their power of the purse?
Yes. Great question. I grew up with two brothers, so there were three boys in my family. The good Lord decided I would be the father of three daughters. So I don't have sons. I do have two grandsons. But one of my daughters counseled me on how to answer your last question this morning. And so I'm going to answer it the way she told me to answer it. She didn't like the way I've been answering questions like that. Quite frankly, we have got to do a better job of electing Democrats. That's what we got to do. Because for some strange reason, too many of my Republican colleagues have decided to hand over the power of the purse to the president. And our Constitution is very clear. The power of the purse is in the hand of the Congress of the United States. And for some reason, this president is using some emergency authority to do things that the Constitution will not allow him to do. Quite frankly, if you look at some of the stuff that he's advocating, he's treating this as if we are operating under martial law. And we're not. We're operating under regular order. And so what he is taking unto himself, and they are acquiescing because we don't have the 213 votes, but you need 218. You're 5 votes short. And so we got to do a better job of doing that. And yes, there are some Republicans that can reach out to, but as I said, it's got to be on a case-by-case basis. As for instance, I think Congressman Bacon from, I think, Nebraska has spoken out today or yesterday about what's going on at the Department of Defense with HRSA. Now, he has gone public, and I think that he'll be out. Yes, ma'am.
Are you, is your name Laura Brooks? Perfect, thank you.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
There's no such.
Now, there's one thing about having as many birthdays I've had. I'm too vain to wear the hearing aid, but tell me.
I moved. Okay. I'm a teacher and I always tell my students there's no such thing as a stupid question, but this might be an exception. I know that it's important not to remain silent, but do you think that the smaller towns and cities who do the peaceful protests like we're doing here, do you think it really changes anyone's mind and makes a difference?
No, that's a great question. People wonder about that a lot, but let me tell you something. Yes, those small communities really, in some ways, get people's attention even more than big cities. This is not a big city, but I remember, I think it was night before last, I saw Rachel Maddow open up her show, and she showed the little city. It was here. It was Greenville and Rock Hill. It's a reason she went to those communities, because a lot of people really feel that we Democrats are big city politicians. That's why I spend as much time as I do in rural communities. I'm going to be in Beaufort. I don't know exactly where we're going to be. I don't know it's going to be Shelby, but I'm in Beaufort Thursday night. Because I think we have to pay attention to these communities, because let me tell you something. Rural South Carolina will suffer under these policies much more than Columbia or Charleston. These policies are going to be the ruination of these communities. Just take the simple thing as soybeans. You'd be so shocked at how many soybeans are raised in South Carolina. And the market, the number one market for South Carolina soybeans is China. And if China is going to be charging our rural farmers 175% tariff for the soybeans, they aren't going to be able to grow soybeans. And I can take you so many other things that South Carolina is dependent upon. Throughout, y'all got BMW up here, but we got Volvo in rural Berkeley County. We've got Mercedes-Benz in North Charleston. We're now making more tires in South Carolina, automobile tires, than they make in Ohio. That's a fact. My hometown of Sumter is where Continental is. As I got on 85 days, I saw a big Michelin up there. And so this state is going to suffer under this president's programs in a way that is almost unimaginable. And so we have got to remind these people who seem to be so enamored with this autocrat of exactly what they're voting for. And we've got to let them know, because there's going to be another election unless martial law is declared.
Okay, thank you so much. So
I get my drift.
I've got Amy Buckingham from Greer, Floride Willard from Spartanburg, Elizabeth York, Spartanburg, and Carl Muller from Greenville. And we also had some questions submitted from one of the classes here on our first campus, the Foundations of World Politics. So while those folks come to the mic, I'll ask that you kind of touched on this already, but one of the students wants to know, how will these new tariffs affect South Carolina? You were kind of speaking to that this second.
Well, while they're coming to the mic, let me just say this about the tariffs with the student that's here. The first thing we have to remember about tariffs is just a fancy name for a tax. That's all it is. And the only question that you have when you start dealing, or the major question, maybe not the only question, is who will pay that tax? Well, there's no way in the world. In fact, we've already had it announced. I had the CEO, I think the Volvo I think the headquarters in Sweden. One of those S's, I think it's Sweden. The CEO came to see me about 3 weeks ago. And we talked about this whole thing. These cars that are made here, these BMWs. I don't know if you've ever been down to Charleston and watched them load these cars on ships. That is a real marvel to me. We can't buy all the cars to be made here. Those cars are shipped out of here. And I checked, there are 11,000 jobs tied to BMW. There are 1,600 jobs, this is direct jobs. There are over 40,000 indirect jobs tied to BMW. Mercedes-Benz make their Sprinter. All the Sprinters are made in North Charleston. 1,600 direct jobs and over 16,000 indirect jobs. These are South Carolinians. If you are going to, if those cars start costing $10,000 more, then that will have an impact on the economy. That's why South Carolina is so vulnerable to what these policies are. It's not just our farmers. It's these people in these industries, not to mention Boeing. So we are in a pickle when it comes to these policies. And there's nothing about this that makes sense.
Okay, sorry, go right here.
I might fall down.
Please don't.
It's a great honor for me
Thank
to
you.
be in the same room with you. I have admired you very much for a
I
long
appreciate
time.
it.
I'm Flory Willard, and one time I taught for a while U.S. history.
Okay.
So these times are very trying for all of us, especially teachers, I think.
Right.
My question is, what can we do on the local level to convince our neighbors or educate them that Trump is a danger to democracy and to the well-being of our future?
You know, I've studied politics pretty much all of my life. When I was growing up, my dad had well, he had a lot of rules, but two of the rules we had in our house that every morning before breakfast, we were required to recite a Bible verse. We couldn't say the same one twice. And every evening before going to bed, we were required to share with him and my mother the current event. We didn't have television, but the newspaper was delivered to our house every day. And you couldn't share that current event without getting to that newspaper. So I became enamored with politics very early. And so I've been studying politics all my life. And one of the things that I've grown to understand is that people don't remember the first time they hear it. The experts say that a person really needs to hear the same thing about 14 times before they really hear it. And so we just got to keep that in mind. You just can't share with them one time and think that they got it. They may hear it, but they didn't listen to it. So we got to keep talking to them until they begin to listen. And I do believe if we share these facts and point them out to people as they occur, I think that we will get people to have a much better understanding of what we're up against. I really think that a lot of people think that style In fact, I told Joe Biden early on, I said, the biggest problem you're going to have in this campaign is stylistically, you're not capable of addressing you. Your style is not what people want. So we got to win on substance. And you've got to connect people to that substance time and time and time again. We have gotten to the point where too many people will judge success on strange things like monetizing everything. For instance, says this person is very successful because they get X number of hits on social media. Well, that may get you a headline, but does that make headway? The whole thing is we've got to talk to people and get them to understand that we are trying to leave a country for our children and our grandchildren that they can be proud of. They need to get from us substance, not yelling, insulting, dividing, excluding. I've been saying to people, President Trump doesn't have anything against DEI. He's taken DEI to another level. He divides, he excludes, he insults. That's DEI. So we've got to talk to people in a way that they just, hopefully they will understand it. In fact, two of my daughters were educated, teacher educated, like I was. And one of them said to me, says, you got to remember, I used to teach elementary school. So I want you to talk to people like you're talking to my students. So they will understand that they're high sounding stuff that people ain't gonna understand. So we're gonna have to start just talking to people, sharing with them. Don't get so angry till you stop talking. Keep talking. Yes, sir.
Can I be next?
Yeah, you are next, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Amy, and I was an educator for 29 years too.
My goodness, you're kind of all the story. Good.
I want to say you pretty much answered my question, but part of our issue today is like what Lisa Murkowski said, the fear. We fear the unknown, and we fear for our democracy. And I just want to emphasize that. And thank you for that answer that you just gave.
Thank you.
It helps with that immensely.
I appreciate that. Appreciate it. Well, fear. I grew up in the parsonage, as I said earlier, and my father thought he was training me for the ministry. And we talked about it a whole lot. And when I went away to college, I thought I was going to spend 4 years at South Carolina State, and I was going to seminary. But then I was in college in the 60s, and I started organizing sit-ins. And so I went on to tell my dad that I decided that I was not going to go to the seminary because, I got out of jail for about the third or fourth time, and that wasn't working too well. And so my dad said to me on that day, he said, well, son, I was expecting the world would much rather see a sermon than to hear one. And I took that to heart. And what I think we have to do is to demonstrate in our interactions with our friends and some people and acquaintances, in order to include those people who may not be a friend, but you might be able to convince to vote in a sensible way. Maintain an atmosphere of trying to, for people to see in you that sermon, seeing you, that which you are advocating. I do believe that the fever is beginning to break. I was at Harvard delivering an event like this last Monday night. And I was on my, I had to change to get there, had to change planes in DC. I flew from Columbia and caught the so-called shuttle from the DC airport up to Boston. And when I was in the DC airport is when I looked up and saw the announcement that Harvard had just rejected Trump. So I was pleased to open my discussion up there with thanking Harvard for breaking the fever. And I think that has happened because the next morning, Yale came out with an announcement. And since then, the Big Ten schools have joined in saying they are going to resist. We have got to resist. But do it in a way that many of you may remember. John West is the guy that brought me into state government back in 1971. And one day he called me into his office and he said, he always called me Jim Clyburn. He's the one that started this Jim Clyburn business. I had never been called that before. He said, I just saw you on TV last night. Says, this is a real good speech. But I want you to remember something. You catch many more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. I've not forgotten that either. So you have to maintain, that taught me to try to maintain an atmosphere within which you can get a problem solved. So resist, but let's do it respectfully. Yes, sir.
My name's Carl Muller. I'm from Greenville. And my question sort of keys off of what you just said about Harvard. What can be done in Washington and all across the nation to stop this senseless attack by Trump on colleges and universities?
Yeah. Good. I was pleased to hear the president announce. You know, I know Trey Goddard very well, and I consider Trey Goddard a friend. I really do. We get along very well. I'm not as good a golfer as he is. I play golf with him. He is one heck of a golfer. But I always told him, just consider the difference in our age and let that account for the score that I'm putting up. But we don't agree on a thing politically. So what I think we have to do is keep the lines of communication open. This is a great institution. Wofford College, I hadn't seen the recent rankings, but I remember the rankings used to be way up there, Reese. And so Wofford College, but I think the greatness is in our ability to share ideas, to really get to know each other, not in shutting down ideas. When you got somebody sitting in the White House saying, you can't teach this, you can't do this, come on. I studied the elections at Tocqueville when I was a student. Now, some of you may remember, elected at Tocqueville, wrote a 2-volume work called Democracy in America. And there's a little line in one of those volumes that I recall, that says, America's greatness is not that it is more enlightened than any other nation, but rather because she has always been able to repair her faults. Think about that. Now, how you do that is with communication. And people have to keep the lines of communication open. When you say, when I was in high school or elementary school, we were taught, and I still believe, that the greatest inventor in American history was Thomas Edison. And Thomas Edison gets that designation simply because of the light bulb. Everybody considers that to be probably the greatest invention of all time. And that was in our textbooks. But guess what wasn't in our textbooks? Is that Thomas Edison couldn't get that light bulb to work too well. And it was not until he got Lewis Latimer's filament to put in that light bulb. Thomas Edison, the white guy, doing great work up there in New Jersey, sat down with Lewis Latimer, the black guy, doing great work up there in Massachusetts, Boston, the son of former slaves. His filament is still in that light bulb right now, R-A-T, right now. And so how is that to be insulting? What is the danger to anybody of knowing that two people, one black and one white, successfully sat down together, successfully worked together, and we can all see each other in here tonight because of their collaboration? And so I just think that we have to, I'm amazed at, I remember the first time I really told that Thomas Edison, Lewis Latimer story that I remember sharing it, was at Gallaudet. I think that's the name of the school, in DC, when you remember we went through a period, everybody talking about the having a Black history. So they said they wanted to have a Black history program. And they called my office, asked me would I come and speak to them. And I went. And the staff was a little skittish about it. But when I got there that day, there were a lot of other people a little skittish about it because I think they had more parents there than students to see what I was going to say. But when I shared that story, I had so many parents to come up to me afterwards and thank me for that. So many of them told me, I never knew that. That wasn't in the books at that time. Is that true? You know, yeah. As my late wife would say, Google it. Yes, sir.
So pleased to be in the same room with you.
Thank
I'm
you.
Elizabeth York, and I am a retired professor at our sister college, Commerce College, just down the street.
Oh, well, I look forward to seeing you. Is it the 17th, whatever, I think the 17th, I'm doing your commencement.
It's
Unless I guess I'm still there. After the night, I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, it's because I'm retired,
Yeah.
just retired, and I hear very clearly your commitment to collaboration and crossing over the aisle. I hear that very strongly from you. But I do have another more pointed question about Social Security.
Sure.
Now that I'm retired. Yeah, it means a lot more to me after I retire. But I'm just imagining what it would be to be a fly on the wall in the Democratic caucus as you are ensuring that your older and retired constituents will continue to receive their hard-earned Social Security benefits. What are y'all talking about?
Well, I thought we had a slide that I was going to show you. No, I'll tell you what we talk about. One of the things, and this is another. This is why I think it's so important for us to talk. I remember when we first started talking about Social Security, people used to use the argument trying to drive a wedge between young people and older people. And they would say to young people all the time, Social Security is running out of money. Now, it's been in place now. It will soon be 89 years that Social Security has been in place. It has never missed a paycheck in 89 years. Because we have the power to course correct. We have the power in the Congress to do the things that are necessary to make sure it doesn't run out of money. But I say to young people all the time, Social Security, you don't have to wait. But Social Security is there for you now. Think about it. You're 35, 40 years old. You got parents and grandparents on Social Security. Think about Medicare. On Medicare, which is a part of Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid came about because of amendments to the Social Security Administration laws. What would happen if there's no Medicare or Medicaid? How many people did you know related to you that need nursing home care and get nursing home care? That's Medicaid. How many people are dependent upon the Social Security check? And if you did not have Social Security, then what would they depend on? They would have to depend on you. That's why we cannot sit idly by. And these are the kind of things that we discuss. And I remember early in the discussion, the way we got people to really pay attention when they were having all these crazy arguments. And I said to them, I said, do you realize that when Social Security came online, that it was not until 1950, Harry Truman in 1950 signed legislation to cover farm workers and domestic workers. When Social Security came online, it did not cover farm workers and domestic workers. And in the South, in South Carolina, 65% of African Americans worked in those two categories. So 65% of African Americans were not covered by Social Security when it first came online. I cannot, and I'm not making this up. The first time I brought that up in the meeting, you asked me, you would love to be a fly on the wall. I can't tell you how many people came to me after whispered, I never knew that. If you share with people what it is you're fighting for, and why are you fighting for, who will benefit from it? Like I say to all people running for office, when you are talking to a potential voter, do like my dad used to do. My father, the minister used to say, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. I say, you, your family, your community, show the people, here is what my proposal will do for you. Here's what it will do for your family. And here's what it will do for your community. If you can pass those three thresholds, the chances are you can get people. Social Security is a big deal, not just for the individuals, but it's a big deal for the families, for the 35, 40, and 50-year-olds who need their parents and grandparents to have Social Security. So don't let them use these selfish arguments. And I'm telling you, there's something in Social Security called survivor benefits. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I guarantee you, sitting in this audience right now, it's somebody or bodies that got their college education of survivor benefits.
Lindsey Graham.
Social Security survivor. Yeah. I wasn't gonna call her name, but that's exactly right.
All right, well, I think we got time for about 4 or 5 more.
Okay.
So come quickly, Benny Harris of Spartanburg. Allison Anderson of Simpsonville. I think it's Judy Bynum of Spartanburg. Derek Quarles of Greenville.
Spartanburg. Where's Judy Bynum?
And Carol Asselon of Eastland.
Okay. That's a Sumter, South
And if you're
Carolina.
upstairs, I think there are microphones upstairs too, so.
Yes, sir.
Congressman Clyburn, thank you very much for fighting the good fight. And I'm humbled by your leadership, your courage, your resilience, and your commitment to Matthew 25. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was a stranger, you took me in your home. And I will tell you this, that you've done it to the least of them, you've done it to me. So thank you very much for all that you do for us. So to my question, no program authorized under the Higher Education Act of 1965 has had more success or impact than the federal Pell Grant, a proven program that has been the foundation of federal student aid for decades. The Pell Grant has unlocked the doors for many lower income and moderate income families with $7,395 annually. Pell Grant has effectively created pathways for students to earn degrees, to join the workforce, and to achieve greater social and economic mobility. With the dismantling of the Department of Education and the Secretary having the authority to decide where to give discretionary income, whether or not whether or not to fund the Pell Grant, what is the situation with Pell Grant and other federal programs that support our students trying to attend college?
That's a good question. Well, thank you so much for bringing up Matthew 25 so that you'll know I didn't go totally astray from what my father wanted for me. You just gave us a rendition of what is summed up in verses 40 and 45 of Matthew 25. But starting around the 14th verse in the 25th chapter of Matthew, we get the story of the talents, which were a modicum of money at that time, but today a talent to us is a gift. And so, and you'll remember the story of the 1, the 2, and the 5 talents and what happened when that person did not use the 1 talent that it was given. So what I'm doing is using what talents the good Lord has given me to fight the fight on not just Pell Grants, but the whole student loan program in a broader sense. Because I do believe that our students are worth the investments. We should have programs that will allow y'all remember the astronaut,
Gil King?
From Lake City, South Carolina. Who was it? Ron McNair.
There.
Ron McNair, Ron McNair, just before that fatal flight, Ron had really been hired to become, this was going to be his final flight, and he was going to become a professor at the University of South Carolina. That's why if you go to the campus, they've got a big program at the school, science program, named for Ron McNair. Ron came by my office on the day that he was made the commitment to go to the university. He said to me on that day, You know, everywhere I go, people introduce me as this PhD from MIT. He had a PhD in physics from MIT. But he said to me, that's not what made me. He said, I left that little tobacco town of Lake City, South Carolina, and got up there at North Carolina A&T, and I had teachers who understood what my background was all about. I could do the remediation. I could get the support. He said, that's what made me. And there's so many young people coming from not just little tobacco towns, tobacco's pretty much gone now, but from the Sea Islands, Wadmalaw, Young's Island, Edisto Island, James Island, Johns Island. Those islands were cut off from the mainland for years. And people, those young people, smart as all get out, but I don't care how smart you are, you got to be exposed to the material. And that's what Pell Grants are all about. Providing an opportunity for these young people with limited resources to come out of these communities and make the kind of contributions that Ron McNair made, and so many others like him. I just told you, Lewis Latimer was the son of former slaves. So it's, you know from that the intelligence is not determined by servitude or skin color. So I think that it'd be a big, big mistake. And the kind of arguments I'm using tonight is what I take into these meetings. And quite frankly, you'd be surprised, as I said, the people who don't know this, that if you share with people exactly what these benefits are, you aren't gonna get everybody. You don't need everybody. Right now, all I need to get 5 people to get me from 213 to 218.
Congressman Clyburn,
Yes.
thank you for being with us tonight. And on a personal matter, I wanted to thank you for always being willing to meet with us. I was on the board of South Carolina Humanities for many years, and you met with us in your office, which very few of our other representatives took the time to do. And as you know, South Carolina Humanities has just been completely destroyed. The NEH has been completely destroyed. So that has nothing to do with my question, but I wanted to have this opportunity to thank you, and thank you for meeting with us so faithfully. My question is, we have talked about a lot of different things. We talked about the threat of Trump. People knew what Trump might do. People were told what Trump planned to do. Yet, this is, it's going to be a difficult question, but I hope you'll be honest and quick about telling us one thing. My question is, what do you think is the #1 reason why people who were eligible to vote did not vote?
Oh boy, it is a tough question. That is a tough question. I've asked myself that, and I guarantee you, I spent a lot of sleepless nights. But I do believe that we have reached a point where, and I think it's just you have to go through this. All of a sudden now we got social media. People tend to believe a lie more quickly than they will believe the truth. And I don't know if how long it would take us to get through this, but I think we will. this whole notion of what breeds success, what demonstrates success, how you evaluate success. I can't tell you how many times I hear and how upset I get. I mean, people tell me, well, he or she got this many followers on social media. Well, this happened to me about 2 weeks ago, and I said to the person, I said, now, would you differentiate between a follower and a troller? I said, just because they're there doesn't mean they're following you. They could very well be trolling you. And so, but I think we have to really get people to understand. When I spoke at the Democratic Convention, I spoke about Project 2025. And you may recall that I said that Project 2025 is Jim Crow 2.0. That's what I said. Very few people believe that there's a new book that I saw. I think it came out this morning. I saw it this morning. Someone has gone through Project 2025 and has said in no uncertain terms that this is a big threat to our democracy going forward. And so what we've got to do, I think, is show people how their futures could very well not be if they do not wake up. The next election is going to be very, very telling. Now, why people didn't vote, I think, number one, a lot of people just got turned off. They got upset about Joe Biden. A lot of people didn't like the way Kamala Harris got the nomination. A lot of people just got carried away with style over substance. In fact, I used to say all the time that there is no substitute for substance. I'm not saying that anymore because I think that with the advent of social media, that style is trumping, and I mean that that's an intended pun. Style is trumping substance. And that is a problem that we're going to have to work through. People just, if I can get the lead story on the evening news, or if I can get a headline in the morning newspapers, I will have done something. No, not necessarily so. Did your comment contribute in a positive way to moving an agenda? Or did it just get you a headline? That is the thing that we will have to spend more time on, getting people to understand it is much more important to make headway in this society of ours than getting a headline. I don't know why people did not vote. I know that I detected the weekend before the election that we were going to lose. In fact, I got phone calls that Monday asking me where I was going to be Tuesday night. I said, well, I've got my youngest daughter's on the school board in Columbia, in Richland County. So I said, I'm going to go to Columbia and sit with her because this Moms for Liberty has been running all over the state. And they were playing big in Richland County, and they had targeted her. And so I said, well, I got a funny feeling that she may not survive this, and so I'm going to be with her. And they said, well, you mean you aren't going to be in Washington for the victory parties? I said, no. I said, quite frankly, I just spent the weekend in Pennsylvania. I'm not too sure there's going to be a victory party. And of course, we know what happened with that. My daughter did survive. She did survive. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go right here.
Yes, ma'am.
You've touched on this, but, my question is, what do you think is the most effective way to fight this administration? Is it rallies, email, call? I call my reps and they don't seem to listen to Republicans. In fact, they tell me I'm in the. So what I'd like to hear is your idea of what is the.
It's all of the above. All of the above is what I was talking about when I mentioned the parable of the talents. We all have different talents. And what I think we need to do is use whatever talent we have in whatever way we can to fight this. All of us won't be able to give speeches. All of us may not be anxious to go to rallies. Quite frankly, I have not been to any rallies. I've done a lot of robocalls. I go to meetings like this. I do speeches at gatherings. As I said, I did a lecture up at Harvard Monday night. I was in New York Tuesday. Wherever I did this, I did a town hall when?
Clarendon, last
Clarendon
Thursday.
County, the other night, in Beaufort, Thursday. I'm doing what I think is the best of me to fight this. I think that people should rally. I march and doing the sit-ins. I'm not a whole lot into marching today. That's what happens when you get to be soon to be 85 years old. You don't want to do the marching. That's why I'm sitting in this chair. So I think everybody have to use their talents. And if the rallying is what you can do it. If writing letters to the others, and I think that's a place that we come up short as Democrats. I think that we need to be invading these editorial pages with alternative views in order to get our point across. So I think that we should decide what it is that where are my strengths? And accentuate that. There was a song way back in the 50s, I believe it was, that said, accentuate the positives and eliminate the negatives and don't mess with Mr. In Between. Y'all remember that? So eliminate the negatives and accentuate the positive. And whatever it is that you're good at, use it.
And Congressman Clyburn, I think you just elaborate a little bit about the phone calls to members of Congress. Do y'all track those phone calls? When you get calls to your office, does it matter? I think that's kind of where she was going.
Sure, absolutely. No matter what a congressperson says, the contrary. You know, I ask my office often, especially when something happens. Now, because I get a lot of threats and stuff, I don't want them to tell me all of the stuff going on. I might ask how the calls are going on this subject. And they might say to me, you know, it's off the chains, people are raising Cain about it. Or you get a mixture of support. So they tell me in a general sense. But I make a note of how people are reacting. I do sometimes ask them where the call's coming from. I just make sure if they coming from my district, But you get calls from all over the country, so we tend to, but Congress people pay attention to that. And I just think that we just remember what King said. Let's don't let the people of ill will make better use of their time than the people of goodwill. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Congressman, for coming to upstate outside your district to hear from people who you don't represent, but you represent all of us, and we thank you for coming tonight. We hope you can do something in DC to represent us forever. But my question tonight is, given the ongoing influence that Donald Trump has over the Republican Party, what's the likelihood that he may run for a third term, although the Constitution says that he cannot run? And what should we be doing as Democrats to prepare for that?
Okay. Well, that is, your question is more apropos than you might realize. You've got Steve Bannon already saying we're preparing for a third term. You've got people saying that they're looking at ways to get around that constitutional prohibition. And you've got people who are actually saying, I've had more than one person say to me, we got a Supreme Court that may interpret that constitutional amendment a little differently from what we may see it and when we read it. And so that is a very serious thing for us to keep in mind. Now, I'm going to tell you right now what, more than anything else, will impact that notion. What happens? There are two things. The first one is going to take place this year in Virginia and New Jersey. Those two elections this year and the midterm elections next year will have more impact on that question than anything else I say here tonight. And that's why we have to win these elections. And that's why if you got friends and neighbors in New Jersey and Virginia, spend a weekend with them and help knock on doors. And let's win these elections. Yeah. So we got to nationalize this effort in a way that we never have before. And you've got more friends. Now, we've got more friends on this question than you really realize. And I wouldn't say this if I didn't believe it strongly. And I take my a weekly poll, not the way Krista knows do polls. When I step on an airplane, I'm polling. I'm in the airport, I'm polling. I watch the way people react to me and to each other. And when people step on the airplane and they looking down or looking up and don't want to look at you, that tells me one thing. But when they look in your face or touch you on the shoulder or say, keep fighting, you got more friends in your life, they are saying that over. Keep fighting. So we've got to fight. We cannot sit idly by and just give up because the headlines in the local papers may be saying one thing. There are more people out here than you realize. So we've got to reach out to them and engage them and work with them and get to the polls. I really believe the ingredients are there for us to win in the special elections. But we cannot do it without really working it. Someone asked me, I did the Head Start meeting over in Greenville. I did their luncheon today. And I met with the Community Action Agency directors, spent about an hour and a half with them afterwards. And I said to them, I said, now, they had a real good invocation at that luncheon. And people were amening and everything else. And so I told them at this meeting, I said, you know, I enjoyed that invocation. But you know, they're sitting in the second chapter of the book of James. It's a little thing that we have to keep in mind. Faith without works is dead. So keep the faith, but work your butt off.
All right. Is Alice Anderson here from Centerville? Did I call your name earlier? And then I want to add one more person because I want to make sure we get a question from a young person, Garrett Gibson of Inman, South Carolina. He'll be our last question.
Okay.
Garrett, if you're still here. Go ahead, Alice.
Thank you for being here. My question is about education. You've covered that quite a bit. It seems really important to all of us. What would you say are some, action items that we can do to better support a balanced education, bringing some maybe sanity back to education? The book bans, I think, are also concerning for a lot of us.
Well, having begun my professional career as a public school teacher, I taught for 3 years in the Charleston public schools. I've got my second daughter retired from teaching. My late wife was a school librarian. And so I believe very strongly in an open public educational system. But I think that what we have to do is really just because you're teaching doesn't mean you can't go to school board meetings. I really think that teachers need to become active with the policymakers and start attending some of the school board meetings and really speak up, because a lot of these people get elected to these school boards. They ain't got no idea what they're talking about. Really. And so I think that teachers need to go to these meetings and really challenge some of these notions and raise issues about the experiences you're having in these classrooms. Because a lot of policymakers never hadn't been in the classroom since they sat there. So they don't know what you're up against. And I really think, to me, it's a more direct action that I think that teachers need to take. Teachers are reluctant to go to these meetings, but they are reluctant to imposing all kinds of stuff on you that they don't know anything about. So I really think it is incumbent upon teachers to really start attending school board meetings and get other people involved. I mean, non-educators involved in what you're doing. Sitting down with your pastors and sitting down with church members and look and offer them suggestions as to what they could do in these school board meetings. We cannot cede the education of our children to these people who've got agendas that may not rhyme at all with our dreams and aspirations. And so we have to really get involved in that. So if there's any one thing that I would say tonight is I would say that teachers get more active in the policy with the policymakers in the school board. And you can do that in a way, once again, you don't have to be confrontational about it. You go to the school board meetings and try to appeal to people's better angels. Now, I know that now and then you're gonna run across somebody that ain't got no good angels, but that's my advice to teachers, is to get more involved. I enjoyed teaching when I was teaching. I really did. But I also knew of the challenge. You know, today, there's students that I taught as 10th graders. I left the classroom in 1965. I still stay in touch with those students. I still stay in touch with them. When I left Massachusetts Monday night and went over to New York, I had lunch with Ralph Dawson, who I taught as a 10th grader. Yeah. I just finished my third book. And this book is going to be published later this year. And it's called The First Eight. And this book is about the 8 African Americans that served in Congress before me from South Carolina. Those 8 people, I have this extensive research about. I've asked some of my former students, James Gaston, who grew up on Charleston's East Side, went off to Harvard, Stanford, became ambassador to Iceland. I've asked them to write blurbs for this book. I've asked 2 of them, Jamie Harrison being one, and Ralph Dawson, the one I had lunch with, to write the foreword to this book. I've shared the manuscript with them. And my whole thing to them, you know what this book is about? It's about those 8 people, 8 African Americans that served in Congress before me. I want you to read this manuscript, and I want you to think about your experiences sitting in my classroom. And then I want you to write this foreword on how you would feel in those 95 years between number 8 and number 9. There are 95 years. And so I said, think about what we're going through today in this country. Think about you sitting in this classroom. Think about what's in this book. And that's how I want you to write the foreword. I can't wait to see what they write.
Congressman Clyburn, first, I just wanted to say that I was at the town hall in Greenville last month, and it was truly an empty chair town hall, and I'm sincerely grateful that this one is not. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I am also a public school teacher.
Oh, great.
And so I talk a lot to young people, people my age and younger, and a lot of my students are scared, and they're more affected by not only the attacks of this administration, but the rhetoric and the rhetoric that it enables. And what never ceases to amaze me is the tremendous apathy that a lot of people my age, and I'm 32, a lot of people my age and younger seem to have toward that when it's their own children and their own students feeling this way. So my question for you is, in the face of this disillusionment, what can we do, people who are looking to organize or potentially run for office, to somehow inspire hope in the younger generation?
It's a tough question. I mean, it's not a tough question. Finding an answer to the question is tough. What I try to do, and what I try to share with people, is think about your own experiences and think about what you wanted when you sat where those students sit, and see whether or not there are differences in what you aspire, what you wanted, and what you're hearing from them. And see whether or not you can in some way rectify those differences that you have with them. And I think that's a tough assignment, but it's something that's got to be done. Because one thing I've learned from young people is they really want discipline. They want discipline. And a lot of times they're crying out for it. They just don't know how to tell you that they want this discipline. I had a very interesting experience about 2 weeks ago. I was speaking to my Masonic group. I'm a 33rd degree Prince Hall Mason. And we were having the council deliverance, and I was doing the luncheon. And after the luncheon, the young man came up to me and he said, that was still at the, behind the head table. He says, "Where did you put that newspaper?" And it startled me. So what the heck is he talking about? Well, it turned out, after a minute, he was a young man that was in my class. I had taught him history. But I used to teach from the newspaper. I mean, my textbook was my reference book. You know, just think about this. I was teaching during the Cuban crisis. What do I look like standing in front of a class back in, what, 1962? When those missiles were put down in Cuba, we were sitting in Charleston, South Carolina, the mine warfare school sitting out there, the Navy Yard, the shipyard. Those kids were worried as to whether or not Charleston was going to be attacked by these missiles. So what do I, if chapter 22 in my textbook is Cuba, and the newspaper headlines all about Cuba, what do I look like talking about chapter 3? And this young man remembered that. And so what I say is, when you talk to the students, really talk to them from their perspective, get out of them as much as you possibly can, and then see whether or not you've got something in your own experiences, your own background, that you can help them reconcile what it is that's going through their minds. Because you got to know that the headlines being what they are, with these young people seeing on TV what they're seeing, you have to help give them some perspective on this. Don't give up on them. For God's sake, don't do that. Don't scold them. In the name of God, don't do that. Try as best you can to say to a young person, yeah, I understand that. But let me tell you how I approach this problem and how it worked for me. I think that our young people want guidance, they want discipline, they want to know that there's some worth in them. I always try to give a young person credit for something in the question, and see, can you reconcile that? It's going to be tough. Their challenge is a little bit different from the way I was growing up. When I was growing up, it was unusual to see what we see in schools today. I mean, we had fire drills. We didn't have any shooting drills, whatever they call it. Fire drills. Now you have more shooting in the school than you have anything else extraneous. So it's going to be tough. But I would just say to you, just know that they really want discipline, and see whether or not you can reconcile your viewpoints on discipline to what their anxieties are. Because it's going to be tough. But thank you so much for committing to that.
All right, y'all. Thank y'all so much for coming out. Thank you, Congressman Clyburn, again for giving us your time this evening. Y'all, let's give Congressman Clyburn another round of applause.
Thank you.
And before, oh, well, that's been.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So don't forget the yellow card. If you want 10 minutes to get your card, please give it to one of the staff. And just as a reminder, folks, just know that we are working really hard night and day to recruit candidates all across the ballot. Next year, we've got elections for governor on down. So we're working to, well, U.S. Senate, Lindsey Graham on down. And we're working to find candidates, and we'll be making some big some people will be making some big announcements here soon. Thank you all so much. If you want to continue to support our same party, here's the QR code. Please click that QR code, and if you're feeling generous, please donate. Thank you all so much.